All right, so welcome everyone to the ClearAdmit MBA application overview. This is a webinar series. This is actually the final episode in our three-part series that we've been doing this month. I'm just thrilled that everyone's joining us, and from all over the world. It's great to see everyone sharing their location. I'm Graham. I'm going to moderate today's session. I'm the co-founder of ClearAdmit. And as I say every week, that's all you really need to know about me, because I'm going to try to stay out of the way and make sure that we get as much airtime for our panelists as possible. So speaking of our panelists, I'd like to introduce each of them really briefly here. So let's jump ahead. We've got Tony Gomez, who's the Senior Associate Director for Master's Admissions over at Carnegie Mellon Tepper. Welcome, Tony.
Pleasure to be here, Graham. Thank you very much.
Oh, it's great to have you. Next up, we're also going to hear today from Kate Murphy, who's a Senior Associate Director in Columbia Business School's Admissions Office. Hi, Kate.
Thanks for having us.
It's a pleasure. We're also going to hear today from Virginie Fougia, who is the Global Director for Admissions, Financial Aid, and Scholarships for degree programs at INSEAD. Hey, Virginie.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. Thank you for organizing, Graham and team.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure. Good to have you back. We're also going to hear from David Simpson, who is the Admissions Director for MBA and Masters in Finance programs over at London Business School. Hi, David.
Hi, Graham. Good to see you. Great to be here, everybody. Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure. And then last but not least, we're going alphabetically here. So Wharton kind of ended the alphabet, but Abby Behrens, who's the Associate Director of Admissions, Marketing, and Communications at Wharton. Welcome, Abby.
Thanks, Graham, and excited to spend the next hour with you folks.
Yeah, terrific. All right. So just so that everyone who's tuning in has a rough understanding, the structure of this is that we have some general questions we're going to ask our panelists. We're also going to let them talk a little about each of their programs' kind of admissions requirements. And then at the end of our main session, each program will bounce off into a little Zoom breakout where you can ask them program-specific questions or anything that you're wanting to chat about. With that in mind, you'll notice we don't have a Q&A box here. So we kind of just encourage you to hold your questions and save them for the breakouts when you can be directly communicating with one of our panelists. But let's kick things off. We're going to go alphabetically for the most part today. So we're going to start with Tony over at Carnegie Mellon Tepper. And Tony, the first question that we have today is, what would you identify as the Tepper School's kind of core values, and how do those values inform the way that your team approaches the admissions process?
Yeah, thanks, Graham. Appreciate the question. So we really have a core here of values that we work with. We work with about 4 of them. We've organized them into an acronym CARE. So the C in CARE stands for our community. Then we have access and equity, recruitment and retention, and our education. So we're really striving to make sure that our people, our community, both internally and externally, perceive our program as being supportive and a safe environment for them to learn and to grow. As far as access and equity, we're trying to maintain an infrastructure for inclusion where talented people from all walks of life, every background, can access, fully participate, and receive what they need to receive in order to be successful at Tepper and beyond. We're focused on recruiting, retaining, and developing people. That goes for both our students, staff, and faculty. We focus on how individualized can contribute to the community and the culture instead of just fitting in. And we also like to put in place, new content, new context to ensure that we can educate people within our classroom through a DEIB lens. We aspire to be viewed as this vibrant hub of innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship. So there's our core values for CARE.
Excellent. Appreciate you running through those. And it's interesting to see how some of those map to what you're looking for. And we'll probably get a little more into that as we talk about your application requirements a bit later on. Let's move on and hear from Kate at Columbia Business School. Same question, Kate. What are the core values and how do they inform your admissions process?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And similarly to Tony, I think you'll probably notice many trends between all of us here, but we really are also looking to bring in students who are teamwork driven and excited about collaboration. We have a really strong culture of inclusive leadership at CBS as well, and are looking for folks from a recruitment standpoint who are excited to work together, support each other, get involved in our community and be really core community contributors when they come to CBS. So I would say the inclusive leadership, the diversity of perspectives, we have a really, really international student body, and a global perspective is integral to the classroom at Columbia too. So that global perspective is definitely a value. And also just innovation, being where we're located in New York is exciting, and the unmatched access that we have is something that we hope folks who come will really leverage and take advantage of. So the experiential learning opportunities that you have is definitely central to the experience too. So all of those things, I think, when we're looking at applications, we're looking for folks who tell us, you know, and can articulate how they plan to contribute to that inclusive community, how they plan to get involved and share their global or international student perspectives, and how they plan to take advantage of the location and really dig deep into being in New York. Those are some of the core values of the school and the ways in which we read applications to pull out folks who are going to really take advantage and leverage those things.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, and I think it is important to underline here that the reason we asked this question of all of our panelists today is because schools spend a lot of time thinking about, you know, what are their core values, and spending a lot of time kind of presenting that information to you. And it's no surprise that that stuff's then reflected in the application process. And so it definitely behooves all of our attendees to kind of get up to speed on what schools say is important to them, and then to think about how they can reflect that in the application process. Let's move on to Virginie over at INSEAD. Virginie, tell us a little bit about INSEAD's core values and how they inform your team's approach.
Sure. So INSEAD was founded in 1957, post Second World War, and since then, since the very first class, we've have had this value of bringing people together to build businesses and transform leaders, transform the world, rather than in this sort of environment that was polarized and in the war type of environment. So really bringing diversity, bringing people together, and the core values are around diversity, independence, because we are completely independent from any other school or universities or a system in France. So we have the freedom to decide on what we teach, on the new programs we launch, and this is very, very comfortable. And as well as the rigor and the relevance. So people, the faculty will go to research and relevant topic, choosing relevant topic that they feel are appropriate for today's world, business world. And that trickles down to probably in terms of diversity, since we've been harnessing diversity since the origin, that trickles down to having students who come from so many different backgrounds, who are interested in exchanging ideas and challenging their thinking, being open-minded to being challenged and to hear different perspectives, different viewpoints, and that I think is part of what we are looking for. So when we have applications, we are really looking at what makes the applicant unique, and how they will contribute, how will they bring their whole experience on during the program. So I think it's really the people who will be catalyzed around positive change. This is very, very important to us in a nutshell.
Got it. Excellent. So now we're going to hear the same thing. David, would you be willing to weigh in on London Business School's kind of values and how they inform how you do your job?
Sure, yeah. I mean, hearing a lot of things that resonate with what I would say. And I think that says a lot about us as a group and the schools and the values we hold, being similar, but with some differences, I guess. London Business School, we're looking to have an impact on the way that the world does business and the way that business impacts the world. So we're looking to develop leaders of the future. I think the words that jump out and the values we build around have been global, eclectic, and collaborative. Original thinking and research into practice come from the fantastic faculty within the school, but around those three words, global, eclectic, and collaborative, we're basically looking for good people who are interested in the world and each other, and are curious to find out more, and are open to being challenged. I know that's not the first to say it, but we don't have to be original here. And also people who want to leverage the vibrancy of London as well. So is that a value? Well, it's part of our identity, and it comes back to that thing about energy and curiosity to get the most out of your investment. So it's not a place where you sit back and let education happen to you. You're at the heart of your own learning. But yeah, the global element, for the fact that 90% plus of our students are from outside the UK, and no more than sort of 20% or so from any one region, shines through, and we make that work. It's not just flag waving, it's at the heart of everything we do.
Got it. Okay. That makes a lot of sense too. And yeah, you make a really great point, which is that when we gather together such a great group of schools to do a panel, like invariably there's some commonalities right across the group here. In any event, let's hear from Abby at Wharton. How would you describe these elements, Abby?
Well, as David just said, I was really just going to say I could echo any of my colleagues here on the call. That is really cool to see that, all of our values are so similar. So if you should go to any institution on the call, you're going to be in really good hands for whatever you go on to do in your career. A couple that I'll call out that might be a little different at Wharton. Personalization is a really big one for us. Our curriculum and our experiences, we want to really make sure that they are extremely unique to you as a person when you come in. You have a team of, we call them your board of advisors. As a student, you have an academic advisor, a career advisor who really work one-on-one with you even before you set foot on campus to make sure that you're going to maximize your time, your 2 years of time here. Our curriculum is extremely customizable. Experiences on campus, the clubs, the conferences, organizations that you can be a part of. Again, we just really want to make sure that the school is serving you best as an individual as you go through the program. So that's a really big one for us. Kind of how we try to identify that during the admissions process, that you really will take advantage of all the personalization that's available to you at Wharton, is we want to make sure that folks can really tell a unique story of themselves through their application, and kind of pinpoint specific ways that Wharton ties into that story. And then I'll really just echo the innovation and collaborative aspect that my colleagues have been talking about. That's another big one at Wharton. We have a tremendous amount of entrepreneurship resources on campus that we encourage all students to get involved in. Tangen Hall is our big entrepreneurship accelerator on campus. There's maker labs, food labs, a bunch of venture competitions. It's just a really exciting environment that everyone can really learn from. And again, it kind of feeds into the collaborative nature on campus, and just really trying to be the thought leaders of tomorrow.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so I appreciate everyone going around, and I recognize that when you're at the back of the alphabet, it's a little bit, everyone starts to take the the ideas, and so appreciate everyone going through this. The next thing that I wanted to do is just give our attendees, because we're kind of early in the application cycle for the coming year, I wanted to give our attendees a general sense of like what goes into an MBA application, and we're going to hear individually from each program, but for the most part, you're going to have to fill out an online application form, with information like your address and your work history and all that good stuff. In most instances, you have to pay an application fee. Some schools provide waivers, but there is typically a fee. You have to send in, your college transcripts. Most schools will require a standardized test. Some schools allow for a waiver. I don't know. We'll go around and talk more about that with this group. A resume. Essay questions are common in the MBA application, and then recommendation letters, interviews, and in some instances, a language exam if you're a non-native English speaker. So those are the basics, but I wanted to get into kind of the nitty-gritty with each of our panelists. And so what we've done is we've put up on screen your basic requirements. And keep in mind, these are the requirements for the past season. And I recognize that some of you might really be in the middle of tweaking your applications for the next cycle. So feel free to correct us if anything on these slides is incorrect, or if you want to sneak preview anything that's coming for the next cycle, you're welcome to do that too. But I thought what we could do is have each of you kind of answer these questions, which is that, at a high level, all these requirements look kind of similar, but what's like something that applicants should know about your school's application? Like what's different about it? And so again, we'll just go through the alphabet and we'll start with Tony at Carnegie Mellon Tepper. So Tony, tell us, we have a slide here and these are the application requirements for Tepper. Obviously, if some of those are going away, feel free to, to tell us, but these are the basics. And what do you want to call our attention to here?
Yeah, thanks, Graham. So it really is a case of what you see is what you get with our application, right? So these are the things that you'll be faced with in our application, making sure that you have your collegiate transcripts, your undergraduate, and even your graduate, if you wish to send those, if you have earned a master's already, most up-to-date resume that you can possibly have. I would encourage everybody to see if you do qualify for a test waiver. You may, in most cases, based on prior academic history, maybe some professional certifications that you've earned, or work experience. You're more than welcome to connect with any of our admissions officers to go through that as well. Many of our admissions officers will meet one-on-one with candidates if we have the time, in order to help sort of guide you through this process. We do have one essay and one video essay. Your video essay, we ask you to talk about your career goals, and your written essay, we ask you to explain a time where you've encountered an inclusive environment and how you would plan to replicate that at Tepper, again, reflecting the goals that we've established for the community. One letter of recommendation, strongly encourage that it comes from a previous supervisor. For our non-native English speakers, we do require the TOEFL or the IELTS exam, or if you've taken, or if your undergraduate education was delivered in English, and it's noted on, if it's noted on your official transcript, that will suffice as well. Application fee of $200. We do have the opportunity to waive the fee by taking our Chart Your Path tool on the website that takes you through all the parts of the application, helps you connect with current students, admissions officers, really give you some insight around there. If you complete all 7 steps for that, you earn the fee waiver. And I will say, our interviews are by invitation, but it is not in my opinion at least, it's not a stressful event. It really is designed to be a conversation between you and the admissions officers. We want to know who you are beyond the PDF that you submit to us, right? We are admitting you as a person, not just this list of statistics that you bring. So we need to be sure that, who are you bringing to Tepper as a holistic individual? And does that help contribute to our overall community?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially, I think the interview is a great opportunity. We've been doing these for a couple of weeks, and schools have been talking about how, just meeting someone, or even in some cases with video interviews or essays, it adds a whole dimension to the file. One thing I want to just remind, I see there've been a couple of questions popping up in the chat. Just in case you joined us late, each of our panelists is going to break out into an individual Zoom breakout at the end, and they're happy to take questions. So I think if you have questions, just hold them for those little breakouts. But let's move on and hear from Kate. We're going to talk a little bit about Columbia Business School's application requirements. And Kate, just sort of take us through, or call our attention to anything in particular that you want us to know about as we embark on your application.
Absolutely. Thank you. In previous years, I would have said that the biggest differentiator is that we have a rolling admissions process, which many of our peers have rounds, but this was our first cycle, having a big transition to reading applications on a rounds process. And it went really well, and we're excited to continue on the rounds journey moving forward. So biggest thing to call out is a pretty large overhaul of our application process in general that happened this year. In terms of application requirements, it's pretty straightforward. We ask for your online application, transcripts from any school where you have received credit, your resume, which can be does not need to be tailored to business school. It can be whatever you would use to apply for a job. Some folks on our team have a preference for a one-pager, so being as concise as you can about highlighting accomplishments and achievements is always our advice there. We do not offer any standardized test waivers, so you will have to submit your application with either a GRE, GMAT, or executive assessment score at the time of application. We can't take them after you hit submit. So we don't have a preference on which tests that you take. We encourage you to take some practice exams and see where you feel as though you perform the strongest and go for that one. If you've taken it more than once, we'll consider your strongest score. So again, it is definitely a holistic admissions buzzword process, though. We don't have a minimum score requirement. We want to see you submit the score that you feel as though will be best reflective of your academic abilities. So no minimum requirement in terms of score and no preference for any of the 3 exams. Whatever you're most comfortable with is fine. We do have 3 essays and a short answer. The short answer is literally just to tell us what your post-MBA goal is in the length of a tweet. And we ask for you to elaborate on that in your first essay. So telling us where you see yourself 3 to 5 years out in your long-term dream job. The second essay speaks to our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. It highlights our co-curricular program called the Phillips Pathway for Inclusive Leadership, better known as PPIL, which is as I mentioned, co-curricular program that was designed in partnership between students and leadership at the school, and asks you to highlight a time where you've demonstrated an inclusive leadership skill. So we outline 5 skills and ask you to tell us about a situation where you've demonstrated one of those skills and the outcome. The third essay was tweaked this year, and it is live on our website at this point for 2025. Similar though to last year, asking you to tell us how you plan to contribute to the Columbia Business School community and leverage the resources essentially that we have at CBS. So how will you co-create your optimal MBA experience at CBS is the new question for 2025. We ask for 1 letter of recommendation, ideally from your current direct supervisor, but understand that isn't always possible. So there's a spot to tell us if you feel more comfortable asking somebody else, if there's a promotion or a raise on the line, or you work for a family business. You can definitely explain to us why you've decided to ask another colleague that's senior to you or a previous supervisor, for example. Letters of recommendation are a really insightful part of the app that we really enjoy reading. So giving those folks plenty of time to write something genuine on your behalf, I think goes a long way. We do not require any language exams. And the application fee, $250. Interviews are by invitation only also at CBS. It is an integral part of the experience. If you are invited to interview, it would take place virtually, either conducted by an admissions officer like myself or an alum of the program who is part of our alumni ambassador program. Hopefully that is an inclusive overview of the materials and kind of what we're looking for here.
No, that's a great rundown. All right, so moving right along, let's hear from Virginie at INSEAD about your requirements and anything you kind of want to call our attention to that maybe is a bit different.
Yes, and we will have something different this year. So big announcement. So yes, we are thinking of, so we keep the #1 essay, the essay #1, which we like, it's working well. We get good responses from it, and people are usually sharing a lot of very interesting stories in the essay #1. We will be making slight changes to the essay #2. This is not live yet, so hold on your horses. We will communicate on this. Pretty soon. So very small tweaks to the essay #2, and essay #3 will disappear. And we will be using probably the Kira feature where you can type in an answer. And so this is moving to Kira rather than the application itself, The other essay remains optional as per the slide here. The other thing maybe that I should mention is the fact that it's all our alumni, all our interviews are upon invitation as well, but they are conducted by alumni. So our alumni contribute to the selection process. This is a good way of for us to understand if you belong to the school, coming back to the values, because they have experienced the program, so they will be also assessing you in that sense. And you should expect the interviews with alumni probably to be more similar to a job interview, because and there could be a little bit of stress dimension in it, because it's at the end of the day, we are preparing you for your next career move, and some of you can feel a little bit stressed in the interviews, and that's perfectly fine. That's part of the journey. That's part of preparing you, as I said, for your next move. We do accept the GMAT and the GRE. We have absolutely no preference. It's equally the same. And we don't have waivers nor accept the EA. So that's the idea with the standardized test. We require the language exam in case you have not studied in English, or the university degree was not taught in English. We do require a test because we are not based in an English-speaking country, as you probably can hear from my accent, and hence we need to understand how you can express your ideas and easily convey your ideas in English, and hit the ground running, because we are a one-year program, not a two-year program, where really it's intensive. And I think that's a quick overall view of the process of what we require.
Okay, yeah, appreciate it. I think I also appreciate you kind of breaking some some upcoming news about the essays. One thing I think you mentioned this, but I just want to underline it, is that you all still do 2 interviews, right? For when someone's so when someone is invited to interview, they actually have 2 interviews, both with alumni, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's a little
correct.
different.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
So just so everyone knows that. All right, so let's move on though and talk with David a little bit about London Business School. Again, David, we've got a slide here, hopefully more or less accurate with a list of your requirements. But yeah, take us through and let us know anything you want to call our attention to.
Sure, yeah. So in summary, we only ask for things that we believe we need, but we do ask quite a lot of questions. So the application is your opportunity to tell us about you, your life so far, and your future. And the way that we structure it will give us the answers we require about, that what have you done, who are you, what do you stand for, and where do you hope to get to. It's very practical though. We only actually require 1 essay, so that's 1 short correction there, and it's incredibly practical. It's what are your post MBA goals? What are your post MBA goals, and how will your experience and the LBS experience contribute towards them? So incredibly career-oriented and practical, and we stick to that because that's what this thing is about, right? This is about the rest of your career, the rest of your life. With the application, there are quite a few smaller questions in there, and they tend to be a bit more about your hobbies, your passions, what you like to do, a bit more information about the work that you do, and also who have you talked to about this? Have you talked to London Business School people? Have you prepared your family and other people close to you for what you hope to do? Why we put those in there? We want you to really showing that you've really thought about coming to this business school and moving to London, for most people that do. So there's quite a lot in there, but it's all very straightforward. There are no traps. We want your transcripts. We want your resume, your CV on 1 page, please. We believe anybody should be able to do that. And if you do it on multiple pages, yeah, we're going to judge you a little bit. It's like you didn't read the instructions. So it's possible to do. It's a challenge, though, to get everything on 1 page, because you've got to decide what to put in there. We require a standardized test, GMAT, GRE. And just final thing on the essays, there is an optional essay, so that's where you got the 2 from. 1 required, 1 optional. The optional is there anything else you want to tell us? We won't answer questions on how should I answer this, but I always say to people, this is your opportunity. Don't miss out on the opportunity. If you think there's something you really wanted to tell us, this is your chance to do it, to get it in there. Like most schools, I think we just ask for 1 letter of recommendation. It should be from someone who knows you well in a professional capacity. Sometimes you can't tell your company that you're applying, so find somebody else. Language exam, yes, just like Virginie, although we are based in an English-speaking country, and we do require it. This is mainly around helping to assess you, although actually a lot is to do with visas. If you need a student visa to come in, there are requirements from the visa perspective to have taken a standardized test. When we're actually assessing your English, if you're from all around the world, we're more likely to do it very practically rather than just the score. The interview is by invitation. It's by alumni in most cases, unless you're really unlucky and you have to be interviewed by me. But nearly all students are interviewed by alumni, just one interview around the world. We use alumni because they know the school best. They have a stake. They have a lifelong stake in the school. They have local knowledge. So wherever you're from, we're likely to match you with someone from there who has experience there. They're also possibly likely to be sector experts from whatever career you want to move into. So there's a whole part of my team's work to match people. It's a lot of work for them, but it usually works really well for candidates. And then we also ask for a video as well. The video is only asked for people who reach the interview stage. So there's a slight difference there to INSEAD. And if you get an interview with alum, you also have to answer a couple of questions on the Career interview platform as well. So that helps us to look at sort of consistencies, gives us a view of someone's English and your potential impact as well. So all of this is designed to kind of help you put your best case forward, and it's done through a sort of advocacy approach rather than us looking for ways to reject you approach, which can prove to be extremely challenging for us when we have to decide who we don't put through to interview, who we don't make offers to, because the standards of applications are just getting stronger and stronger as some really seriously talented people out there who want to come to business school. I think that's it. I don't think I've missed anything crucial.
Yeah, excellent. All right. One thing you said that reminded me of a point that came up in one of our prior webinars is this one-page resume or CV. And someone made the point that it's a really good exercise to distill your background into a single page. And in fact, it can be a great first exercise to embark on as you begin thinking about business school, because it forces you to kind of create this like greatest hits document. So in any event, let's move on. Let's hear from Wharton. Abby, you've been very patient as we've gone through the alphabet here, but we have on a slide here your requirements from this past season. And yeah, just be curious to have you walk us through whatever you want to highlight here.
Yeah, so a lot of straightforward information up here for us that I won't go into too many details here, but happy to kind of talk on a one-on-one more detailed basis on anything here on in our breakout room. Our application is not changing this year, so we have no new surprises coming at you. A couple things I'll call out. We do not have a testing waiver. We do require either a GMAT or a GRE from everyone who applies. 2 essays. The first one is career focused, and the second one is more focused on the Wharton community and how you will be a contributor. We do require 2 letters of recommendation. As my colleagues have been saying, we do prefer that to be someone who has served a supervisory role to you. But again, it's someone who knows you best and who can really talk to your strengths. And the language exam for our non-native speakers. But kind of the biggest way that our process differs is our interview process. We conduct group interviews. We call them team-based discussion. Once you are invited to interview, you'll be able to schedule a time, and you will also receive a prompt with your invitation. The prompt is a secret. It changes every year. And you will have about 1 or 2 weeks between the time that you receive your invitation to interview and when your interview is actually scheduled to prepare for the prompt. The prompt is Wharton specific. And we will ask you to come into your interview prepared to answer the prompt. The first part of your interview will be about 30 minutes working in a group of 6. And I should also mention that these are virtual. We started conducting them virtually in the pandemic, and we don't plan to bring them back in person. We think that you get a more equitable experience by signing on virtually, and these sessions have become a lot more diverse with people signing on from all over the world, which is really cool to see. So it will be a virtual interview. Again, first part, you're working in a team of 6. You'll all come in, you'll present your individual responses to the prompt, and then you'll have 30 minutes to come up with a group response. So your evaluator most of the time is going to be a current student, but we do have admissions committee members evaluate TBDs. I have a bunch of them coming up for our deferred admissions round, and it's actually one of my favorite parts of my job. So that's who you'll be sitting in the room with. At the end of that 30-minute block, you do a group presentation on your response to the prompt, and we're observing how you work together as a team, kind of what role you play, kind of, if you want to think about how to prepare for this, think about what role you serve or who you are when you're in a big group meeting at work or when you're sitting in a conference room. We kind of want to see who you are in that setting and how we can envision you in that setting at Wharton, because as we said earlier, extremely collaborative environment. So again, it's kind of just to see how you fit into that setting. And then after that group session, you do get a 10-minute one-on-one interview where we ask you just a couple questions, just between you and your evaluator. So you do have a little bit of time just to speak to yourself individually. This all sounds very intimidating, but I can assure you that most people come out of the TBD saying that it was fun, a really rewarding experience, and actually gave them like an actual, sense of what life would be like at Wharton. I've had people come out of TBDs making plans to meet up with each other over the summer. So we really enjoy it. And it's probably the biggest way that we differ.
Okay, I'm glad that you highlighted that, because I think it is probably one of those things that sort of jumps out as a difference. So, all right, appreciate you walking us through. And now we also know that your essays, so the essays that people see on the website are staying the same for the coming year. So that's good to know. Now we have just a set of questions that were audience submitted that we're going to run through. And I've kind of assigned one of these questions to each of you. And again, just so our audience knows, after we run through these questions and have a little bit of a fun, we have a couple of fun questions we'll run through as well. Each of our programs is going to break out into an individual Zoom breakout room where you can ask them questions about their program and application process. So stay with us if you're interested in talking to the schools individually. But we're going to go back to Tony at Carnegie Mellon Tepper. Tony, I have a question for you that came to us, which is about outside activities or, hobbies, volunteer work, all the, a lot of schools ask about, what do you do outside of the office, or what were you doing when you were in undergrad aside from studying? And so I wondered, do these activities have to be volunteer oriented, or are other passions and involvement valuable to you, like hobbies or different things that people might do?
Yeah, I think that these outside activities are very important to the candidate profile, right? It shows us who you are and who you are bringing into this program, right? What you're going to be contributing. Are you going to be meshing and sharing activities, passions with other members of the community, or do you have something unique that you can bring to the community and possibly share it among the rest of your peers? It doesn't have to be volunteer oriented. Me personally, I love seeing volunteerism. That's part of my background. That's part of who I am, and I feel like I can connect with people when they share that. But we also love seeing students who may be passionate skiers, right? Sports enthusiasts. Maybe one of your passions was, I don't know. I'm thinking about a candidate that I interviewed a couple of weeks ago. She started her own cake pop business on the side because during the pandemic she just discovered a passion for baking. Right, started sharing these things with her friends, and they encouraged her to start up her own little side hustle. So she opened up a little shop through Instagram and sells cake pops on the side now. I love seeing what really drives a person besides just their 9 to 5, and I think it's great to be able to know this in order to see how you're going to be impacting your peers, your community, the whole environment here at Tepper and the rest of our schools.
Yeah, I appreciate you shedding light on that. I do think that you make a great point about trying to figure out, when I used to read for admissions, it was like a great exercise to just try to think about, when this candidate shows up on campus, like, how do I think about their involvement on campus? Like, what are they going to do when they're not in class? What clubs might they join? How are they going to be involved? And so I think it's worth listing all these things, whether you're a marathon runner or, someone who's doing volunteer work every weekend, that kind of thing. So yeah, appreciate you shedding that light, Tony. Kate, we have a question for you now. Kate from Columbia. Is there any advice you might have for someone with limited work experience, let's say 2 years or less? How do I demonstrate some of the qualities that you might be looking for if I'm on the lighter side with work experience?
Definitely. I can start by saying that at Columbia Business School for our full-time MBA program, on average, students have come into the program with about 5 years on average of full-time work experience, but we don't have a minimum requirement. So it's definitely not to say that you couldn't be admitted with 2 years or less. I think 100% of the class, though, entering last year did have at least 1 year of work experience under their belt at the time of joining. That said, it's definitely more about the quality of your work experience than the quantity. If you could have 7 to 10 years of work experience where you haven't really contributed in a super meaningful way to your organization or grown or demonstrated much career growth, and that would be less advantageous than someone with 2 years of really substantive work experience. So ways that you can highlight that would be the progression, the growth. If you have taken on a team, for example, if you've taken on projects outside of the scope of your job responsibilities and gone above and beyond to contribute there. We're looking, to see results-driven leadership opportunities that you've taken advantage of and stepped up to the plate to execute on. I think, it's 2 years is a long time. If you have done things that I would say, I loved how you explained using your resume as like your greatest hits. Explain on your resume the ways that you've meaningfully contributed and your accomplishments and your achievements, I think, and having the opportunity to elaborate on that in an interview and your letter of recommendation can do a really good job of kind of maybe highlighting the things that aren't necessarily coming through just by looking at your job title. So for example, if you've gotten recognition for any sort of performance or won any achievement awards in your role for going above and beyond, I think all of those things can be really helpful as an admissions committee to determine your professional promise. And explaining clearly in your essays, I think, why at this juncture in your career you feel it's the right time to pursue business school. That's different for everybody. So that depends on your goals and the experiences that you have in your background too. And if for some people at 2 years, that is the right juncture in your career to pursue business school. If it's for a pivot or to grow in your function or industry. So hopefully that answers the question.
Okay. Yeah, no, well said. And I think there are, yeah, as you point out, while 5 is the average, there are plenty of people who are below that and plenty who are above too, right? So, all right. So moving along, we have another question. And this is kind of the yin to Kate's yang. We've got a question about older candidates for Virginie at INSEAD. So let's say I'm over 30 at the time of application and I have, 7 or more years of work experience. Any advice there about what you're looking at?
This is very much linked to what Kate just shared. I would say when you have an average age of 29 or 29, which is the 28 or 29, which is the case for INSEAD, that means you have people who the range is likely to be from 23 to 36 or 37, right? At the end of the day, what matters here is really why are you coming to the program at this age, at this moment in your life? And you may want to explain that. And this is my advice to you. So really reflect over why is it the right time, the right moment for you in your career, but also in your personal life. Sometimes it's just that we have had pregnancy and taking care of a young born. So obviously you come into a program a little bit later than if you haven't. If you started a family or if you moved countries around and you have had a few gaps in your career. Same thing if you have to do the military. Some countries have military obligations, and obviously let's take an example of somebody who studied 5 years and then works 3 or 4 years, have to do the 2 years military service compulsory. And then they will come obviously on the program, they will be 32 or 33. So here really the best advice is to explain why. And don't let the admissions committee guess. We're not very good at guessing in general, so try to tell us. And also maybe a last example for me, the oldest person we had was a woman who was 38, and she had graduated from the army, she worked from the army and from West Point, and then she had a baby, she deferred, we agreed to defer her entrance, and then she started and was 38. So it's just explain, feel free to tell us.
Okay. Yeah, you're making a really great point that I think I mentioned last week when we were with another group of schools, that you never want the admissions reader to have to play detective. So, make sure that you're kind of laying these things out for your reader. David, we have a question for you that is not about age. This is a kind of a silly one, but I thought it'd be fun to get a response to. This is someone who if they submit the file and there's a typo or something, that they got wrong in the file. Should they do something about it, or is it just kind of like more, you don't want them calling you to bother you once they've submitted? Like what's the advice on something like this?
I get the fun one. I like it. So, like many of these questions, the answer is it depends.
Yeah.
First of all, we might have different answers here. Some schools will be like, no, absolutely not. You've got to own it, whatever you submit. And imagine having to deal with 10%, 50% of people who want to amend their applications. So it's the same as we don't accept supplementary materials that we haven't asked for, because otherwise we'd have to have a team doing that all the time. However, we're quite realistic about this. If you spot something and it horrifies you, we'd be okay for you to approach us and to make amends. Now, it may be, if you do that late, it might be someone's already read it. So it depends how serious it is. If you say Wharton instead of London Business School, that's a bit of a clanger. We're going to read that, and we're going to have questions about it. I've put through people to interview who've put that in. Sometimes we pull people up on it. Sometimes we don't. It depends what everything else is like. You could do a tiny error like that, but it's huge in terms of the waves in some ways. But it's context. It's what's reasonable. Do you know what I think is important though? If you are contacting a school, find out what our rules are, what our approach is, whether you can, and then remember that whoever you're approaching, if you think they're a fairly junior administrator within the team, we don't think of anybody that way. All colleagues are important colleagues, and if there's any kind of flippancy or disrespect or in sort of rudeness to the instructional tone, or can you do this please, we work together closely as a team. So every interaction you have with us is important, whoever it's with, whether it's with the dean or whether it's with somebody in a relatively junior role in my team. But I think I'd rather you spotted something and owned up to it than didn't do it. I mean, the answer, of course, is don't make any mistakes. Read, reread, get somebody else to read. Don't miss bits out. Do the checking in the first place. But we'll probably all have different answers on it. But for me, it's fine if you spot it. But if it's something tiny, again, might judge you a bit. So you could have just let that one fly.
Yeah, I would say it's use your judgment, but also, as you correctly point out, check your stuff before you submit it and have someone else read it. Whatever you need to do, just make sure that what you submit is good. And I would say the advice that you gave about how you interact with everyone on the London Business School team or any of our panelist teams is important. So do not make that mistake, as David described. All right, last question we have is for Abby at Wharton. And this one is, MBA programs are often pitched as being the perfect place to make a big career change. But what if you really want to make a significant leap? Like, let's say you want to change both industry and, function and maybe even geography, right? So any advice on someone who's pitching a pretty significant career shift?
So I would say that pivoting careers is like one of the top reasons that people pursue an MBA. So you would be in good company no matter where you end up. And it's definitely not a disadvantage. It's an advantage, you could argue. And we see this all the time. So I think from an admissions committee standpoint, when you are crafting your application, definitely make sure that you have a plan in place. And be able to articulate that plan. So just don't say, I want to pivot from media into private equity, and that's what I want to do. And I hope I'm coming to Wharton to do it. We want to get specific. So we know that you will be able to maximize that 2-year experience here, or wherever you would go. It's a very short amount of time. So this exercise, it's kind of more beneficial to you than to us, so that exactly how you're going to make it happen. I'll also add that once you have that plan in place and you've told us about it in your essays and throughout your application, once you're at graduation, no one's going back and with like a check mark, like, okay, yes, they did this, this, and this, just like they told us. It's just, again, like I said, just to make sure that you have a blueprint in place before you would start your MBA. So and when you're thinking about that plan, do research on any institution that you are applying to and identify their career resources and what specific ones are going to help you get from point A to point B. Whether that's a career management office, any specific advisors on campus, professional organizations, conferences, student-led groups. We really rely on our student-led groups for our students who are making a pivot, because that's where you're going to connect with folks that you're going to be working with. And folks that they've already worked in the industry that you probably want to go into. So they're a great resource to you. Make sure that you know any connections there that would really benefit your pivot. And then make sure you're researching leadership opportunities on campus. And again, finding ways to specifically tie those into your plan. Then my last piece of advice would be to connect with students and alumni who've done a similar shift or who are going on to work in the area that you're trying to pivot into. So you can talk to them about their personalized experience.
Great advice. And I think, underlining all of this is, come in with a plan, as you say, and, do some research, make sure that the school is actually capable of pushing you into the field that you're targeting, et cetera. So, Abby, because you've been so patient with all of our alphabetical order, we're going to do the lightning round. And then just so that our attendees know, we have these fun lightning round questions that won't take long. And then we're going to let our schools free to go into their breakouts so that you can ask them all the questions that I see many of you have been posting into the chat. So save those questions. You'll get a chance to jump on with each of our schools individually. But what I'll do, Abby, is we have 3 lightning round questions. I'm going to ask each of them to you in succession. Just give me kind of quick responses. So describe the Wharton admissions team in 3 words.
We have a slogan in our office called "Read to Admit." It's actually 3 words, so that's what first came to my mind. That just grounds us in being fair and equitable and really reading your application, looking for ways to admit you, not deny you.
That's a great slogan. Yeah, I think that's a nice way to look at it, as opposed to like read to reject. You're reading to admit. That's great. Okay. Next question is, and actually David kind of foreshadowed this, but dropping the wrong name in an application essay is a cringy mistake. What's another kind of don't that you would kind of want to call out here?
Well, I'm definitely a stickler for typos, but I think what we've been seeing in the past couple rounds, don't rely on ChatGPT and AI sources too much. We totally understand they're a great brainstorming platform, but you would be surprised. We can really tell when you've used some assistance to write your essays.
Yeah, I can't agree more on that. And our last lightning round question for you, Abby, is just tell us about something you're looking forward to that might be happening soon at Wharton.
Preterm is coming up in the fall. That is our student orientation when you're coming into your MBA. It's actually a full month long before you even start classes. Our office is really involved in getting the planning off the ground for that and assisting you once you're on campus. It's the most exciting time of year. Everyone's like, it's first day of school vibes, excited to be there. And that happens in August. So looking forward to that.
All right, excellent. All right, so we're going to go backward through the alphabet. David, you're up next. Describe the LBS admissions team in 3 words.
Okay, got 3 Ds here: diverse, dedicated, and diligent.
Okay, excellent. What about a cringy mistake that you want to tell people to avoid?
I think I've used it before, but I'm going to say it because it's still there. Making cultural assumptions. That sounds big, doesn't it? That sounds serious. But actually, I'm going to lighten up it by saying, don't assume we all like soccer in the UK and tell us how big a soccer fan you are. I'm not.
Yeah, I know you're not a soccer fan. Yeah, that's right. All right. So, and then the last question is something that might be happening soon at LBS that you want us to know about.
I'm going to be cheeky and say two. One is we're introducing a new program, a new one-year MBA program designed with a prerequisite for people who already have a master's in management. So it's, it's very specific. It's only for a small group of people, and it's a trial run next year. And the other is a new dean. We've got a new dean starting. We're all super excited about a new dean starting, and can't wait for him to arrive and to meet him.
All right, excellent. All right, so moving right along, Virginie, describe the INSEAD admission scheme in 3 words.
So I went when I saw your questions, I went to the team and I asked them, and they said foodie. Foodie is definitely one. Rigorous will be my answer as a manager for them, and I would say joyful.
Okay, excellent. How about a mistake you want folks to kind of avoid?
Oh my God, we choose your recommenders well. It's really a pity when we read the recommendation letter, and once we had one from the father, and which is perfectly fine to ask father to write a letter of recommendation, but poor applicant, he was not even recommended by his father. So.
Oh boy. Okay. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, and actually you're making a very good point. I think some candidates make this mistake of they put the recommender's name and email into the system and they think I'm done with that task. I don't need to like check in with my recommenders, make sure they understand why I want to get an MBA and kind of give them the information to create a great letter. All right. And then what's one thing coming up either in, the Middle East or Asia or in France on one of your campuses that you're looking forward to?
It's going to be on all campuses since we are celebrating a decade of the Gemba program. Our Gemba program is celebrating 20 years. So we'll have plenty of celebrations.
Excellent. All right. Okay. So let's see. That brings us to Kate at Columbia. Columbia admissions team in 3 words.
I am going to go with forward thinking, collaborative, which we've said a lot, but it really is true, and dynamic.
Okay, excellent. Something that kind of bugs you that you want people to avoid in the admissions process.
Yes, kind of piggybacking off of naming the wrong school, which is pretty blatant, but also if you're going to reference clubs or organizations or resources on campus and you maybe mention the name of a club from another school or call out the career management center as how it's titled at another school, those things really stand out to us. So also suggesting that you're going to start a club, for example, that maybe we already have on campus can be a little bit of a red flag. So doing that research is important, being diligent in double checking the things that already exist and the things that you want to get involved in on campus.
And on a related note, I would add taking a school's essay and kind of rewiring it a little bit to drop it into another school's prompt is also easy for you all to spot. You're quite familiar with your peers' essay questions and they, you can see when someone's doing that. So totally. Similar kind of last but not least, something you're looking forward to happening at Columbia.
Yeah, so we're lucky that we have a January entry point for our full-time program. So those folks are on campus taking classes this summer. So I was just working with my team this morning to get our class visit program up and running for the summer. So if anybody's in New York or planning to visit New York, we will have the opportunity shortly launched coming in June to visit classes and sit in and take advantage of what it's like to be a student at Columbia. So stay tuned.
All right, excellent. Tony, last but not least, at Tepper, tell us a little bit about your admissions team in 3 words.
Yeah, I would say diligent, thorough, and compassionate.
Okay, excellent. And then something you would recommend candidates to kind of avoid as mistakes go.
Oh man. So not necessarily regarding the application or the essay, but in contacting AOs. So our email addresses at CMU honor the university's founders, Andrew Carnegie and Andrew Mellon. So part of our email address is andrew.cmu.edu.
Yes.
A lot of intros to these emails say, "Dear Andrew, here's my question.
Got it.
So
Yes, that's got to be okay.
please make sure you know
Understandable.
who you're emailing.
Yeah. All right. And then last but not least, something that you're looking forward to happening on campus.
Yeah, a couple things. So first off, we have a new concentration that's launched, concentration in artificial intelligence. So that's on the application. Students are able to start studying that come fall semester. And it's also our 75th anniversary as a business school this coming year.
Oh, wow.
We have a
Okay.
lot of different activities to mark 75 years here.
Nice. So a couple of anniversaries within the group here. Nice to hear that. So I know our attendees are probably impatient to get with you individually and ask you all the questions they've been saving up. So what we're going to do now is thank our panelists for taking part. Virginie, David, Kate, Abby, and Tony, really appreciate your time. We'll let you guys slip off. I'm going to stall our attendees for another minute so you can get settled into your breakouts. But really appreciate you all making time. I love doing these, and just the advice you give is just so valuable for folks at this stage of the process. So we'll let you slip off into your breakouts. Meanwhile, if the attendees could just stay with me for a moment as we let our panelists get set up, that would be great. We have a little bit of advice. I think we have a slide here with just some like quick pointers if you're early in the process and thinking about working on your applications. And yeah, so here we go. So we can, what we always recommend is that, if you're still kind of yet to take a test, like aim high, right? Do your work to get good test scores if possible. They tend to just help you out in the process, obviously. Apply in the round when your application is at its peak. What I mean by that is, don't apply if you're not ready. Like make sure that you've put in the time to, get your application into shape. There are some caveats to that if you're in a very overrepresented group, you might want to apply in the first round. Third point here is to engage the community at these schools. As you research, reach out to current students, the heads of clubs, alumni. That research will pay dividends when you go to write your essays or when you have conversations with admissions officers. It will show in your file. And this fourth point is really related, like demonstrate interest. Like as you learn stuff about a school, make sure incorporating into your file, because it really will help the admissions reader to get a sense that you're passionate about joining that program. And that does matter in the end. I mean, you could tell all of our panelists were a little turned off by the idea that you might mention the wrong school name. Well, that's because it makes them think that maybe you're not going to come if they admit you. So make sure you're being pointed about demonstrating interest. Okay, so our breakout rooms are open. I did want to mention in July, we're going to have another series of events where we dig into just the essay questions at all of these schools. I think we have, I want to say, maybe 20 schools that are going to join us over the course, 20 or 25 schools over the course of 4 different events. So all these top schools, and we're going to ask them the hard questions about their essay prompts so that you can get good advice as you're working on your essays. I do want to thank everyone that joined us today. And if you've joined us for the last couple of weeks as we've done these, really appreciate it. So you can head on over to the individual breakouts. You can bounce between breakouts. Just remember, you can go from one to the other. They will stick around for about 30 minutes usually. I mean, honestly, they often stay as long as you kind of have questions. So enjoy, everyone. Really appreciate you being a member of kind of the ClearAdmit community and doing these events. So best of luck to everyone in the application process. And thanks again for joining us today.